This coming June, the 10th through the 14th of 2026, we are very excited to offer an opportunity for married couples to get away from the craziness of life and focus on strengthening their marriages, but also within the context of a mission. So many couples are now having a growing desire in their heart to have a mission for the times in which we live because they see the needs and brokenness all around them, whether they're married couples. Also, it's just how do you make it as a family in these challenging times? Well, on this special retreat that we're offering called Ascend, it's going to be in the heart of the Rocky Mountains in beautiful Montana from June 10th to the 14th. And we're going to be very blessed to have today's guest joining us as one of the pivotal members and our chaplain throughout this. It's an experience I guarantee you will stay with you for the rest of your marriage, the rest of your family. So I hope you enjoy our conversation as we look at the broader context in which we are now as we are in 2026. Where do we go from here? How do we serve God? What is needed in these times to be able to step out and to do and dare something great for our Lord? So enjoy, and I hope that you'll visit us on our website, ascend-experience.com, and sign up today. We have a very limited number for couples, and I promise you it's going to be an experience and a retreat that you'll be grateful for, that will stay with you for the rest of your marriage. You are called to do great things. To build, to lead, to influence. How do you balance faith, family, and calling without losing your joy? No one prepares you for how hard it can be to hold both mission and marriage together. If your marriage is weak, your mission will eventually suffer. But what if you could strengthen both? What if your mission and marriage could thrive together? Welcome to Ascend, a high-level immersion experience for Catholic entrepreneurs and mission-driven couples. Fortify your marriage to magnify your impact. Embrace holiness and wholeness for sustainability. Scale your mission to new heights with new insights. At Ascend, you will build resiliency into your marriage. Retreat and rest and adventure together, and anchor yourselves to your unique family why. Gain the tools to sustain your mission without burnout. Take the time to dream and plan together again. Form lasting bonds with like-minded Catholic leaders. Be nourished in body, mind, and spirit. You will be challenged by expert coaches, theologians, and master leaders. And you will be inspired by saints and mystics who are relevant to your call. This is your moment to step into the marriage and mission God designed for you. Because as the family goes, so goes the world. It's time to attend Ascend and take your family to the height of your potential together. I am joined today by Father Nathan Cromly, a dear friend who you probably have seen in previous podcasts that we've had. And he's always been a real gem for us because he's filling an important niche within the church, and I think in the Catholic world in general, business world, and that is leadership. And here we are, we're at the beginning of 2026, a year that has so much significance to our country as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of our nation's birth. And here we are also at the same time as a country standing on a knife's edge. Are we even going to have a 251st anniversary? I don't say those things lightly, because if you look at what's going on in the world, then, or especially within our country, it's obvious. If they say we're one election away from everything being completely turned over again, that's a bad sign. That's a really bad sign that you have no foundations. But in the history of the world, that's always a challenge and often a bad thing. In the history of the church, these are what we would call opportunities. I guess entrepreneurs, well, they certainly would call it opportunity as well, but more for like wealth. They want to capitalize on people's destruction. But we're here to talk about the solutions, especially though the call for Catholics to be leaders. So, Father, welcome. You join us from just outside of Denver in Englewood, Colorado, from the St. John Institute, an institute that has already done tremendous things since its founding in 2018. I remember the years leading up to that, conversations of this coming, and it's been such a joy and inspiration, really, to see not just its evolution, but its impact. Because in the end, that's how we measure everything that we do: is what impact does it really have on the kingdom of God? But it's great to welcome you back from Colorado. So welcome, Father.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Howard. It's an honor to be back with you.
Well, Father, I want to jump into this. I've already mentioned a number of times the emphasis on leadership, but I think this is perhaps the biggest vacuum. Leadership as it responds or corresponds to not just society and culturally, but where it starts even before then in the family. And that's one of I think, the trademarks of the St. John Institute that you founded is this emphasis on both the family and business and how you can combine those two things in a world where it seems like we're not battling, but we have to face new paradigms because of economic circumstances. Also, the times in which we live, of people wanting to respond to the challenges of our times, and couples, married couples, who feel a call, but they don't really know what to do because we've been formed by older paradigms that are kind of run its course and have led to the problems that we've had today. So, why don't you give us your eagle eye view of what we're looking at in this picture of well, let's just say the vacuum that we face today.
Well, I'm glad you brought up, family and business, because I think it's an area that the church really should be much more attentive to in her preaching. The fact is, we have all of the spirituality and the wealth of the wisdom of the saints and the presence of the Blessed Sacrament and the power of the church's liturgy. But it's always astounded me as a priest to see how little impact all that can actually have. And when I speak like that, sometimes people take offense because they see the good, and I agree. There's a lot of good impact that's had. There's a great youth ministry out there. There's retreats that are very impactful. So I'm not saying it's not, but I wish it could be more.
Mhm.
How could what we do every Sunday at Mass be really transformative? And and what I've noticed is that wherever there's strong parental leadership in the family, there's an access point for the faith. And so I've asked myself, what's keeping the leadership in the family from being its fullest, or being at its fullest potential? What's on the parents' minds? Because I can tell them about the Bible, I can tell them about the Sacred Heart of Jesus, I can tell them about Marian apparitions, I can tell them about Fulton Sheen, and they'll smile and nod like this. But there's something else going on behind their eyes. What's going on back there? And what they're thinking about is, I gotta get my kid on the soccer team so that they get a scholarship, so that they can afford a college, so that then they can get a job in which they can have kids who go on soccer teams to get scholarships to go to college to get jobs.
Mhm.
And or what are we going to do with our business, or how do we sell it, or do we not, or how do we repair our marriage because my husband is so engrossed with his company, and yet our kids are yearning for their dad. And I thought to myself, well, if we can speak about those issues first, maybe address that context, we can create the space that the people need to let the word of God come into their hearts. And so that space is the world of business leadership. And I've been astounded that the when you speak about your 401ks, or you speak about the effects of tariffs on the economy, or you speak about the whether or not to invest in silver and precious metals, and how suddenly the men are much more attentive. I'm not saying that they weren't before, not saying that women aren't attentive to those things as well, but in general, suddenly I find that the men are ready to listen, because that's literally where their mind is. And that means that if we can address the world of economics and the world of business for Christ and attack the gospel there, we make room for the message of the gospel to impermeate the fabric of our families. But if we don't speak about the world of business, the big looming question in everyone's brain is, how is what I'm learning at church literally going to make an impact in my real life?
Hmm.
How many young people that go to youth programs that are fantastic and they meet Jesus Christ in high school, then they go into the real world of college and they lose their faith? Or it's the same thing. They go to the Newman Center, they have a great thing in their colleges, but then they lose their faith when they go into their careers. And
Hmm.
it's kind of like, as a priest, just how far do we have to accompany these people? Because then we create young adult programmings in the parish. But it's always this dichotomy between the real world and the world of the church. And I want to bust that open. I think that the bridge between the real world and the world of the church, the world of faith, is the heart of the leader. The world of faith is to create a lion's heart that will then engage the world on a mission that comes from God. And instead of us trying to just extend the bubble as long as we can, although that's good, we need to do that. But in addition to doing that, we need to also focus ourselves in saying, you've been given a mission by God, and that mission is you. You
Hmm.
let Jesus in so that he lets you out. And when you speak like that and preach like that, you get over this divide of the real world and you make the real world the world of faith. And that bridge is what I'm interested in. That's where leadership comes in. But it's really important, Peter, because if we don't protect the family by fighting for business, we will lose the family, because business is a non-negotiable. The economic factors is why people. I use this silly example of soccer, but it's a real thing. People get their kids in sports in grade school, having them do all kinds of practices before school. And you're like, why would you be getting your 12-year-old girl up to be swimming at 5:30 in the morning? Well, that's because we want her to get on the team. Why do you want to get on the team? It's not just because she enjoys it. She might not even enjoy it. It's
Hmm.
because you want her on the team, because you want her to get a scholarship so that she can go to college without even knowing who she is. And that's in a bad situation. It's not always that way. Many times it's wonderful. I'm not just slamming sports in schools, but I'm slamming the mentality that says that because we have these economic pressures on us, we can't govern our family the way we wish we could. That's a problem, because now all of a sudden you've given up the leadership of your family. So hey, if you're like, no, we want to govern our family to be the best athletes for Christ, okay, good, then you're fine. I'm not saying it's one way or the other, but I'm saying you need to be in charge of your family. And the number of Catholic families, Christian families, that just go through and they're like, oh, we wish they could go to church, we wish they could go to their grandmothers, they wish they could go to the family reunion, but we can't. Really bothers me, because it's not just a question of will, it's a question of lifestyle that's being dictated by an economy and a social context that has been unevangelized. And so I think we need to take the gospel message, into the fabric of the economy, fabric of work, of business, of investments, in order to create a friendlier atmosphere for supporting families so that the parents can lead their families with greater freedom towards Christ. So it's not the main attack for the church, but I think it needs to be done by anybody who can do it. And that's what my ministry tries to do.
You mentioned the word over and over that we we're all familiar with, obviously on various levels, but just the word economy, the way you were explaining it too, is like that is the very life in which we live that reflects the values of any society. Certain things are are intrinsically part of that, and you can say over time one thing can have more weight over another, which is also perhaps over time where if weaknesses of that economy are not addressed, it eventually can lead to a structural failure and maybe even a collapse. When we speak of the word economy, people just think about some of the things you mentioned. Well, where's the dollar at? Precious metals, those kinds of things. But what is and this is a philosophical term, really, the economia, but how can we understand that? Because like what you're saying is there really is no economy without defined values of what it is. Maybe I didn't, if I was following you right, but like what you're talking about, the sports and the families, it's, you know, the economy in which we're living is being, like, we'll say today, is so absorbed into, let's say, athletics, sports, exterior things, to the neglect of everything else, which is why everything else now begins to fall down and it falls on
Well,
marriages, families. Go
yeah,
ahead.
following the beautiful tradition we have in the Catholic Church of our church's social teaching and reading through the encyclicals of the popes on social questions, a constancy remains. It was most beautifully voiced by John Paul II in his teaching, honestly, where he spoke about the need to humanize the economy by genuine spiritual values. So if you think of what the economy is, it's the way that our energies and our work multiplies or diminishes our potential for more activity, right? So you could think about that in terms of money and into business, into capital, and with capital you can generate even more money and even more capital, and that allows you to generate even greater potentials for our social being. Hospitals, schools. I mean, we take it for granted, but like you go back to social structures without education, and you are not better off. I'm reading, for example, right now, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. It's not a book I recommend. I have to admit but I'm reading it because it's part of our literature in the world to read. But what you read in education system here, total collapse. And this was situated in the late 1700s, late 18th century, and these people don't know right from wrong. They don't. Their family mores are completely upturned, and you realize, well, gosh, they're also living without the benefit of a lot of social circumstances that we take for granted today. Well, those things are generated by the forces of capital and the power of work and labor united with capital. So but that generation, that productive activity of human beings, of transforming the physical universe to make it, well, more apt for other activity, needs to be claimed by values that give direction to that activity. To say we're not generating all of this energy to be put into football stadiums, and then to have the football stadiums be occasions for people to simply get drunk and and have infidelity in their marriage, for example.
Mhm.
But like without that, well, then what else would we have a football stadium for? The forces of the economy left without a humanizing influence would do just that. We'd create football stadiums for pleasure because people will pay for pleasure. And then who cares what goes on in these football stadiums as long as they generate more capacity for more action? What the Christian does is we enter into that human sphere of human activity generative of even more capacity for more activity, and we give it a finality. We say there's an end goal to this whole thing, which is the human spirit's full flourishing, and that can't be defined other than in spiritual terms. And now all of a sudden we become leaders because now we're telling the world where it could go. and what the ultimate end goal of our human activity is. And so limitations might even be imposed that this technology is not permissible. This technology is not good to be used. We should indeed put limits on this or that capacity of our generative, productive, world for the sake of it achieving a finality which is commensurate with the true greatness of the human person. And so that's where I come in as a priest working with the economy is I try to insert genuine human values that our work is for the sake of our family and not our family for the sake of our work. And if the work is for the sake of the family is for the sake of the glory of God and the service of society. And so you have a hierarchy suddenly that imposes limitations on things that are lower in the hierarchy at the service of things that are greater. That's our duty as shepherds. That's their duty as Christian leaders. And that's what I'm very, humbled and yet proud at the same time to be able to work in as a priest of Jesus Christ.
So, Father, how do you see this coming together in this moment of history, though? Because we're at a, it has different names for it. It's called, by some, the fourth turning. Fulton Sheen called it the end of an era. He called it over 80 years ago of that. St. John Paul II called it, we're literally at the height of this final confrontation. We see these cycles of history, and we're clearly at the end of one of them. Within the church's history, Fulton Sheen saw them every 500 years. And we always had a pope to lead us and prepare us for what was coming. And he saw John Paul as the one who was chosen to lead us into where we are now. But we're clearly at a moment, if you want to even narrow it a little bit further, looking at America here, that our country, we're at the expiration of what a modern democracy's lifespan is, about 250 years. And we're at the end and we're bankrupt. Economically, on the financial side of things, it's unsustainable where we are. This isn't conjecture. These are like absolute facts. What is it? Almost $40 trillion of debt. No one can really get out of that. And when you add all the other things that are involved with it, it's closer to 100. So just on that side, you see monetary things collapse. That affects jobs. It affects all these kinds of things that we're trying, and the rhetoric is trying to do patchwork of this. Things are moving so fast, and what's going on in sort of the reorganization of the world. We have, if you want to look at the flip side of things, we have, and you talk about a finality. We have the secular finality spelled out very clearly before us by organizations such as the World Economic Forum or the United Nations, their Agenda 2030. These things aren't, people making up like conspiracies. Like it's literally right there. And I guess, but the thing is, it certainly is a conspiracy against humanity because it's replacing what systematically has been dismantled from Christendom. Like Fulton Sheen said, Christendom is dead. So where do we start from here? Because the talk is here in America, and Fulton Sheen, he said this very strongly. We don't want to save what brought us to where we are. People say, "Oh, well, how do we save America? How do we save these things?" He says we don't want it because it all led up to where we are now, to everything now failing on the moral, economic, societal. You go through all of the points there, and there they are. I hear banging. Is that mine?
Yeah, no, that's on our end.
Oh, okay. Like somebody let us in. Um,
Yeah,
so this clearly is um, an, uh, an undeniable pivot point of history. So this isn't like we're in the midst of something and like, oh, there's a few now called to be special leaders in here, few called to try to reform this. My position from my analysis of things is we've passed the point of reforming anything because our fundamental foundations have never really been there. And it's hard to argue against that aspect of, for example, people say, oh, we're a Christian nation. Are we? Then why are we where we are? Why are we one election vote from complete communism? How is that even possible in a nation? You literally can go a 180 from one thing to a next. You have 0 point of reference that's fixed to guarantee a future of a nation. Otherwise, you know, it loses all forms of definition of what a nation is. So that's why, I mean, this is a very complex question, but I think this is exactly where we're at right now as we go into 2026, looking at where we are in the 250th anniversary of this nation. All these other paradigms I mentioned earlier, they're collapsing. People, you don't have a security in any job. There is no security anywhere, really, unless you have that in your own abilities. You hear that more and more. The secular, like Fulton Sheen says, when the church drops something, the world picks it up. Where do we hear that language? We hear it in the preppers, the survivalists, all of these, but they're all building their own castles, and you don't get the Christian spirit behind that. It's sort of like my castle will be standing when all your nonsense that you fell for is going down, and you're stuck with that. You made your bed, now you're going to sleep in it, but I'm ready. And so we don't really do anything about that, and we're not like we're not getting the Catholic message in the midst of all this of where do we even start, because it's a
Well,
frightening
what
thing.
would you propose as the foundation that's missing? Do you have an idea of
Yeah, I
what that
do.
would look like?
I'm very bold. The fact that our country's not Catholic, period. It's the only thing that has worked in nations. There's no way around it. When you look at history, what built Western civilization was the Catholic Church, period. Everything else has had an erosion, especially since the high point of the Renaissance, where with secular humanism began to come in, where the pride wasn't just for the kingdom of God and using all your beautiful things, it became more about man's ability without God. And then you fast forward to the Protestant Revolution. Now you have a religious watering down to where we have, what, 50,000 denominations. And then you have the cultural breakdown of the French Revolution. It's been systematically just torn down. And it's been the church. It's explicitly been the Catholic Church and its influence ultimately on the family. So it's like when we're rebuilding the family, we want to rebuild them spiritually. We need to fortify them morally. And then there's the other factor that, this is, I think, the genesis of why we're talking here too, and where I want to go is building a new economy based off of the rebuilding of the family, because it's still within the context of you have to work, you have to do this, and that's how, like, for example, communism was like, well, that's why we're the answer, because we'll provide that for you. You don't have to worry about that. You're made to work, and we'll take care of the other things. That's the Prussian system as well. So with a culture that's so far away from the paradigm that was building up for over, let's say, 13 centuries, and now it's literally at its lowest point. And this is easily verified by statistics on every level, even within the Catholic faith. How many actually believe in Jesus and the Eucharist? What is it? Only 30%, I think it is. Fewer than that go to mass on Sunday. It's like, how, where do you start? You just focus on, we have to find, kind of like the American Revolution, 1776. You go back 250 years. What is it? The seven, what do they call it? It's like the 8%, the 9%ers, whatever it is, 7%ers. Of how many they say actually were the ones who brought about the victory and the founding of the nation. I mean, it's always a small number, even in Scripture. It's God who always works. Even Sheen talks about this. He works in the minority. But it's a complex picture because people say they feel it in their gut. This is not working, but I don't know what else to do. What do you want me to do? Now you're saying go out and start my own thing because that's more secure. Then I still have my positions. I mean, I understand that. I absolutely. I mean, there's times where I wish I had some security. I wish I had guaranteed check coming in. But at the same time, there isn't really that. You and I probably know many people who have lost their positions just like that, or they've lost their 401ks, or we're at a. I always like to emphasize we're not rebuilding something. We're founding something new. And what does that paradigm need to look like in 2026?
Wow. Well, that's a prophetic thing to say. We're founding something new. Who's the we? You just mean that America's evolving into a new pattern in your estimation?
I do. I think I see it from a theological level as well. And I look, as you know, with my background and with uh, Mariology and studying things, I've really been led over the last couple of years to dive into the significance of Our Lady Guadalupe. 2031 is the 500th anniversary of that. I find that extremely interesting that the bookend of this era of 500 years began in 1531 with Our Lady Guadalupe, and I think it ends at 2031. If you use Venerable or Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich's numbers, with the life of Christ, it's private revelation, so you don't have to believe it. But from some of the revelations that she had, she actually was able to get to pin down when Jesus was born, because there's always been discrepancy. Could it be a year or two different? And
Uh-huh.
it actually points to 2 BC. And there's also scientific things that would point to that as well as being. But I find it interesting that makes the year of redemption 31, AD 31. 50, so
Oh,
you look
wow.
at all these different things. If you look at 2031, you're like, wow. And I don't want to go too much into this, as much as I love to, because I've talked about other things. But if you look, not all the fathers subscribe to this, and this, but there are many. If you look at the biblical age of things since creation, we're basically at 6,000 years. That's the biblical, and a lot of the fathers of the church that they really believe that, and Saint Hildegard and others, and doctors of the church, and and if you talk to like Hugh Owen of the Colby Center out of Virginia, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's fantastic to listen to. Anyway, they go through all of these things about origins and the creation. But if you follow that model, and history then being in like each day of creation representing 1,000 years of history, that brings us down to the end of the sixth day coming up. If you use redemption as the date, it'd be 2031 would be the end of the 6,000 years, and then you'd have the beginning of the seventh day, right around that time. Let's say, like I said, this is one projection. What I have found really, really interesting, and I think the more we look through the eyes of tradition and the scriptures, it becomes a lot more meaningful than we're a meaningless drop of sand or speck of sand in the cosmos. We have no significance whatsoever. Is to see it this way, then you begin to see, wow. And then Sheen's 500-year cycles. Sheen died on the day that Our Lady appeared in Guadalupe, December 9th. That's his feast day. I'm like, I put all these, I see these as pieces of a puzzle that God puts there for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. What is God saying in all of this? I see something very significant. Um, I don't have what do they call it? A Palantir, which is not the company, but it's interesting that how the company's named after that, to see all things in the future. But like I said, evil's agenda is to be accomplished by 2030. And they keep saying, we're behind schedule, we're behind schedule. And we know what that agenda is. It's the complete as what St. John Paul II said, the kingdom of Antichrist, or the gospel and the anti-gospel. And so it's the human versus the anti-human, or transhumanism. They're working feverishly, and like I said, this isn't hard to discover. So it's like I see a lot of things converging at that time. And the reason I mentioned like Our Lady Guadalupe and these points is because you're talking about a new foundation. Mexico went through the miracle of Our Lady of Guadalupe, bringing over 10 million Aztecs to the faith, and human sacrifice was ended. Well, just a couple of years ago, Mexico went full circle when they removed all federal um, uh, prohibitions against abortion. So now it's legal anywhere in Mexico. They've gone back to human sacrifice. Here we are at the end. So, and we're rapidly approaching 2031. And we know the phrase, things quicken at the end of eras. And we're seeing that happen on all these different levels. Just looking at our nation is a good example of that too. But this is a global picture. And it, Our Lady of Guadalupe is about bringing the Catholic faith to all the Americas. I firmly believe, and there's other, and I could take you down this rabbit hole, but this is not my podcast. This is really for you to share your wisdom with us. But the age of Our Lady of Guadalupe is also the age of the Immaculate Conception, because she first appeared on December 9th, the original day of the Immaculate Conception. There's so many connections between the Immaculate Conception and Our Lady of Guadalupe, going back to 8 centuries before then. And then you have our country's our Catholic land before we were an actual nation. There was Catholic roots there. You know, the Mississippi River was the river of the Immaculate Conception, what the Jesuits brought over. And so it's like it never took form because of the colonization of the English. And that's an interesting story. But um, so the fact that these roots have never been able to come up, but you can say the seeds were firmly planted. You know, why is it the United States was the first country to lead sort of this movement of the Immaculate Conception before it was a dogma? Many people don't even know we were consecrated to Mary as the Immaculate Conception in 1847. Before the dogma, before Our Lady of Lourdes. I find that very significant. And it ties into Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Immaculate Conception. I think that the future, the America 2.0 is going to be explicitly founded on these things. And I think God's just going to have, I believe the only way that's going to happen is that he's going to intervene in some level. He's going to be doing it in one way through his saints of these times, which is where I'd like to talk about that next. And he's also going to be doing it because there are certain things that are so irreparable that he's, and certain things will need to be stopped. That I do think that the age of his kind of intervention is also very imminent, whatever that really means. But if you look at the history of, there's of biblical history, every 2,000 years there's been a massive purification. First was the flood, then of course was the redemption from sin, and now we're 2,000 years from that. It ties into other things that you hear other podcasters talking about that I'm aware of. I don't need to know anymore. I'm more like, how do we enter into this? How do we fight this? How do we build something new? That I find that really exciting, but it's also it doesn't answer quite the question. So what do you do with everything else that's falling? That really, in a certain sense, can't be saved. Because let's just say we all ran for Congress. Is it even possible to turn things around for this country to go back to rewind it to 250 years? Not where we are now. I don't see that being possible without making something explicitly Catholic because we've already seen the end of it. So, that's the kind of the question. And that's why I'm intrigued by this is what your special charism, I guess you could say, behind the St. John Institute, at least as I've understood it, and I reflect on your mission because I remember the early conversations right when it was starting. I was always intrigued as we were looking into like how do we use what God has given us. My wife Chantal and I, who you've known for a long time, how do we do this? I feel something I'm passionate about. Like I don't even know where to start. I hate asking for money. I don't like how, and that seemed like the only path. You got to go a route where you got to beg for money. Like I don't know. For some, they love that or they think that's the way to go. I struggle with that, because there's also sometimes then you might lose freedom. I know I'm I'm taking too much of this time, but I think I maybe because I'm going to talk about it enough because I want to hear the responses of where we can, how we can concretely begin to build from here. Do we simply focus on finding this small group of saints who get this, or do we just focus on how do we save our marriages and families? Because like when you think about it, that's almost enough. But then you part of that is too, well, what are you asking me to do? I got to change everything. It's almost for me, so it's almost like circle after circle, and I don't know where the round and round stops, so we can jump onto the carousel and start fixing each one of the things as it goes around, so it's not wobbly. I don't know. If you can make sense out of any of that, Father, I'd love to. What
Well,
is your perception like? My gosh, Peter, you're crazy. Okay, this confirms a lot of things. Or I want to know your insights because that's I don't have those answers.
well, I mean, the answer is Jesus, and uh, I think what we're
Practical
talking about are
answers.
things. Well, we're about to get
No, I'm
there.
just saying. Of course, it's Jesus. You're like Peter
Well,
doesn't know
because if you think
Jesus.
about it, when Jesus sent the 12 out, he sent them out with a mission that was the same mission we have today, and the means that he gave them were extremely poor. Love one another, keep my word, celebrate mass, form communities that are centered around me as their purpose and me as their source. That was the way that the church advanced her mission then, and it was the what Christ intended for us to do. The apostles went out to form communities, and in communities they created a culture that was new, and that culture then rejuvenated the cultures that they were in. Without doubt, historically there's a lot of violence that took place and overthrow, and Charlemagne was not it was not gentle, right? He so if you yeah, so in any case, there was a lot of that took place, and so you know but foundationally, that mission, I think, is the only one we have to go back to, because the one who's doing the protagonist of history is Jesus Christ,
Mhm.
and the Christian is relative to him. So how can I be his instrument in the world in the most effective way that I can, is the real question each one of us has to ask ourselves. Bigger questions like what kind of agenda can we do together to advance that? Well, I mean, honestly, I don't know how to answer that. I'm not a bishop. The bishop should be thinking about it, though, and we do. We create universities. If you think about that, the power of a Catholic university. Could you imagine what we could do if we actually had a university? Right? We have a couple anyway.
But
But
that
like that.
costs $100,000 a year. You know what I mean? Like all the education paradigm has changed. Everything has been changing, and they're unsustainable. And for all intents and purposes, from a practical point of view, they're u- they're they're useless. I hate to say that, but like in the information age in which we live today, why spend $100,000 for a BA in anything? To be honest, that's not directly related to your skills. To developing things that are going to really make you capable of pursuing the things that are on your heart versus being completely dependent. And I'm not saying like this is the almost an anti-gospel of independence. God made us to work in community, but every leader has had to step out, and more than anything, as you were talking, you have the key component with all of this. It's like sidetracking everything. Is you have to have a heroic faith and trust. I have an enormous picture right here of Jesus, the divine mercy. Jesus, I trust in you. And every day I look at it, I'm like, why would our Lord command us to write that on there? I don't know if him writing ask well, we know he wrote one thing in the dust, but he commanded us to write that. And it keeps coming back. It's because if you don't do that, you'll never step out. And you'll never know what God's going to give because you don't do that. But if you do, the few that do, and I'm not just talking about like the Faustinas and religious and things, we haven't oh, I shouldn't say this. I'm sure there's many examples, but of the lay people stepping out and doing that. I mean, they just become a magnet of inspiration because it's not just their abilities. It's like, I trusted in the Lord and he's going to work this out. But I also realize I have to pour myself out of this, so I didn't mean to cut you off on that.
No, I mean, if we go, I mean, what are we supposed to do practically, Peter? That's the question, right? And I think on the one hand, you have to say, of course, there's room for us to do things in a collective action that have, major ramifications on our social structure. And for those who can, they should, right? Like, why not? There's nothing to keep it back. We look at the power of movement, social people who have done that in the past, and it's been beautiful to behold. The saints have oftentimes done that. Ways to advance the values of the gospel in our modern polity or shared communitarian experience needs to be embraced whenever we can. Um, there's other ways, however, by which we can do that. And on an individual level, having a seventh child when you're 53, that's kind of a heroic thing that some people are doing. Just spoke with a woman pregnant with her eighth, and she's 44. That's pretty heroic. Is that going to change the world? Absolutely, it'll change the world. you know, and to the single people who choose to engage their world by doing the good that they can do in their lives and making the world a brighter place everywhere that they go. It's not so much a question for me. It's like of the size of the task as it is of the intensity of the presence of God in our task. But there's also room for majestic endeavors to be undertaken, and I think that those things are laudable. So at the heart of it, Peter, to your point, over and above the multiplicity of things that we can do as individuals and collectively to bring the values of the culture of the church to bear against the culture of the world, uh, at the heart of it all is the will to do so. And that's where I think, at least I like to bring my efforts, because I believe that anywhere you have a saint, you have a leader. And since every Christian is called to be a saint, every Christian is called to be that leader. And so the church, whose job it is to engender saints, has as her mission to engender leaders by consequence. And so, how do you engender holiness in someone's heart? It's by initiating and fomenting the depth of the relationship every single believer has with Christ. And the qualities of that relationship, at its heart, the quality of relationship of faith is courageous. You need courage to be a Christian. You cannot be a coward. You have to be brave. It's the condition for following Christ. Do not be afraid. No, 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 I'm afraid. Well, then, if you're afraid, I can't help you. You have to not be afraid. You have to choose to follow me. And then there's all kinds of, there's no limit to the great things that we can do. But we can lose track of that foundational necessary adherence to Jesus at a personal level of dependency and faith by overly emphasizing all of the practical measures that we could do, because all the practical measures have no measure if in fact the measureless is given to them, and the measureless is that spirit of faith, like a child that says, be it done unto me according to thy word. The more we say that prayer, the more that God uses us for the great designs that he has upon our world.
Hmm. There's so many things that we can focus on. I remember what St. Teresa of Calcutta says, the need is the call. One of the ways to discern what God could be calling you to do is what of those needs really stand out in your heart, and then do something about it. And at the same time, you also have the phrase "pick your battles." Today, and I wonder about this because we see now people, like especially in Europe or in Australia, um, the kind of the pre-crime thought police are out there. I mean, this isn't the Minority Report movie anymore. It's this, from like 20 something years ago. It's real, to the point where even our country is like talking about now withdrawing billions of dollars from England because of how they're trying to control the minds of people and all that, freedom of speech. And I'm like, well, that's a battle that needs to be found, because if you are fought, because if you don't do that, then you lose it. So, oh, there he is. He's back. So if you put up with these things, you'll lose it. Like, I think it was Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin. People ask, well, um, about what's the kind of level of tyranny that is tolerable, or are you? He says, well, tyranny will only be at the level that you permit it to be. And so we have different levels of battles that need to be fought. But for Catholics, I don't say but for Catholics, but when speaking of Catholics, where do you see as the most important battles to be fought outside? I want to have the presumption of the biggest battle is for the sanctification and salvation of our families. Okay, which is still, like, I don't want to take that for granted, because like it's still a real small minorities really doing that. I watch not every week, but it almost seems like that good families being picked off to complete disasters. And sometimes, I mean, without the intervention or the miracle of God, it would be irreparable at that point. And we've all had to fight our battles. Chantal and I talked about we've shared with others the battles we've gone through. And it's not about knowing your faith. That does not guarantee anything. It does not guarantee anything. And I would vouch that well, I won't go in that crusade. Because, we got all these things about orthodoxy and tradition, like, of course. But some of these people who are 100% behind the scenes, are like, they have miserable families because it's all about that, and that's it. And I'm all about the both and. So, but anyway, what kinds of where do you see as the greatest? Once again, going to the vacuum, the voids. Do you see Catholic leadership is needed most in the cultural sense, to begin to build our culture explicitly back to Christ? And I would say, with the Catholic teachings, especially its moral and social teachings, that's really for society. I mean, obviously, the full picture would be perfect because they're built off of the faith itself. But where are those most important areas? Because I'll tell you one thing: Islam's doing it. People talk about, oh, we need to be really, tactful, as well as have certain tactics. Like, we're seeing the repeat of history happening. They don't hold anything back. It's Sharia law. We're here. We got you outnumbered. We owned basically a whole party of government. And what are you going to do about it? That's really what it is. Like, they're not like, well, let's try to, like, there's an incompatibility that historically has always been with that and the Christian, and you could say a Christian West, or almost any other civilization, because that's the history, and even within their own beliefs. How are we Catholics supposed to be? What should we be focusing on?
I think the human heart is always the same. The culture around us varies, but Christianity, especially the Christian evangelizer, needs to look for where the human heart is not having its needs met. I was very struck by John Paul II in his book Crossing the Threshold of Hope, when he was asked by the journalist why the communist wall fell. And the journalist, in his question, makes it sound like he's leading the Pope to reference Fatima and Our Lady's miraculous interventions. And Pope, of course, doesn't discount that. But in other places, he mentions that kind of thing. But in this particular answer, He said communism failed because it fails to take into account the spiritual aspect of the human person. It was a system that was limiting to the very people who were supposed to ascribe to it. And so it was doomed to fail because it could not answer the cries of the human heart. And I thought that was so profound that it gives me confidence facing our present day culture, which John Paul II said is kind of on the flip side of the same coin of materialistic communism, which is materialistic capitalism. He says the materialism is the problem because we have our young people who are being offered joys that aren't really joyful. And I think that their heart is open and yearning for another answer. And not just young people, but I think families are, I think peoples are. And so here are some points that I think that where we stand to give a solution that is attractive. And I think that that's then where we should put our efforts. Make the sale where the person's going to buy, right? Well, number one point is our view of sexuality. What a great moment. The more that our culture devolves into hedonistic definitions of sexuality, the more that the beauty of the spiritual friendship of husband and wife united in thick or thin till death do they part shines out. I find my experience from the pulpit when I preach about the beauty of marriage is an overwhelmingly positive one. The receptivity of the audience is captivating. They want more of it. And usually I'll, from the pulpit, address young people straight up and say, don't you want this? How could you want anything else but this? And they sit back smiling at me, radiant, because what a proposal that we're making to them. This is a great moment for us to put our emphasis on, to reclaim the relationship between man and woman in love and specifically in sexuality, because this is a moment where we can proclaim something the world would that far surpasses anything the world would offer. Second spot that I think we should really put our emphasis is on the dignity of the human person. Again, this is almost like low-hanging fruit. We walk around telling people that they're not a collection of molecules that's evolved from slime in tidal pools. I laugh all the time. I'll do this also from the pulpit, not from the pulpit per se, but from my different spots of preaching, where also we say, well, you want to be an atheist? That's fine. I mean, I respect your choice there. But tell me what happens when you die. You know, I mean, is that really a prospect that you hold as something that makes you motivates you? I've got something much more profound, that you're actually not a collection of molecules, but you're the Son of God, and that you're going to live eternally and with a love that expands beyond all telling without any limit. I mean, this is an amazing, and there's nothing to compare with it. Even if the person were to say it's false, it's a much more captivating falsehood than the doldrum of your truth, so I'd like to say, of course, then you can defend it a million ways and show just how beautiful, in fact, it is and how true it actually is. But that blows people away because suddenly we come out speaking about something everyone has at heart, the rights of the poor, the downtrodden, the needy, but we're actually promoting it, saying that they have these rights over and above anything the government or society would care to recognize, because they have the innate quality of a creature of Almighty God, willed for its own sake as a spiritual being. What? Wait, gosh, Peter, it's like, why aren't we doing anything else? And
Mm.
then thirdly, I think just, a spot where we can really make an impact is in our proclamation of consummate beauty. Honestly, it's in a visual world where people are happy to look at AI generated images. I protest. I'm not happy to look at AI generated images. I think we can do much more great, wonderful things than this. I think nothing could ever replace the creative energies and genius of the human spirit. And I think that suddenly becomes a place where Christianity can shine a light that is attractive and resurrects the human heart because of the value of our art, the value of the proclamation of soul that we make through our art, and then just the presentation of a transcendent beauty that consummates the desires of the human heart as a real possibility. And we don't even have any competition
Hmm.
because a secularized world is not even trying. And so I kind of chuckle to myself at the one hand because we can act like this Goliath that's before us is overwhelmingly intimidating, but he has a big forehead and I have a very big stone. And I'm not intimidated by Goliath. On the contrary, I'm kind of saying the bigger that you make yourself Goliath, the more obvious that you show your weak spots. And those weak spots are where the human heart is clamoring for God, and we can bring him more effectively than any materialistic answers could even try.
Hmm. Yeah, as you're talking, the one thing that I kept having ringing in my head is we're built for what's real. And you think about that, people say, well, no, I actually like the conveniences of the digital things and all that. But it's interesting. It's like, well, even when you have something through a digital, whatever, a screen, I got screens all around me right now. Um, it's interesting is, well, now we know that, well, you should have blue light lenses on so that you're not ruining your eyes or your brain waves and all that kinds of like, even when it seems like you have what you need, there are still things inherent to it that you still need to filter this or that to access it so that I don't say maybe it's not con natural. It just points that it is not. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that beats what's real. When you mentioned beauty, it is probably maybe the biggest place that we could start. Because as you're talking too, I think about the questions that would come from places where to teach about these things would be more than revolutionary. You could be arrested. I think of the woman who was arrested in England. Perhaps this is a global story, but she was arrested for praying outside of an abortion clinic. And you can watch the clip. And she said, well, what am I being arrested for? He says, because you're praying. I was like, I couldn't believe I heard that. And she got arrested. And then later on, I think she was released after a while. But so the fear that's put on us to paralyze us is the other thing we have to fight. And I think it keeps coming back to what you're talking about as well, the heroic level of faith that we have to even engage into it, because you have to know what you're getting into. In America, we still can, in a certain sense, fight most of these battles in the public arena. But in other places, you can't. I mean, without immediate retribution against you. And so, anyway, I think it's brilliant. I don't have it in front of me, do I? Yeah, I want to just read a little clip. It's like 2 seconds, but as you were talking, it verifies exactly what Fulton Sheen talked about when he was talking about the phases of the gospel, the electronic gospel, and the evangelization that's to come. I wonder if I can find it super super fast. Um, so I also know of our time. Where is the electronic gospel? Here it is. He says he talked about radio, TV, and all that stuff for reaching people, and he says there is a third approach to an electronic audience, which will be in the future. It will not always be the direct, nor even the indirect, which I used, radio, television. He says it is what might be called the anthropological. I do not use this word in the sense of the science of man's beginning. I merely mean it as the roots of the word imply, a study of man. The presentation of religion has been principally from God to man, but now it will be from man to God. It will not start with the order in the universe, alluding to the existence of the creator of the cosmos. It will start with the disorder inside of man himself. It will take all the findings of our psychological age and use them as a springboard for the presentation of divine truths. He says, I often wish that I were younger so that I might use this third approach, which I've mentioned, starting with the unhappiness inside of the human heart. The audience is always there, low hanging fruit. The opportunities are ever present. There is no need to take hold of tortured souls like Peter, agnostics like Thomas, and mystics like John, and lead them to tears, to their knees, or to resting on his sacred heart. Anyway, it's like, there it is.
Yeah. I
Um,
can't believe you found that like that. That's pretty, you've got an amazing mind. This you must
I
be an
knew where it
expert in
was in
Fulton
the book,
Sheen.
and I was like, I have a couple of tabs, but I just looked at the top. I'm like, I knew it's the electronic gospel, and my guardian angel, I think, helped me because keep us on our time. But yeah, I mean, he was, and then John Paul II's theology of the body is exactly that. Man's so twisted. When you untwist that and you just give it the picture of what God intended it to be, it really is revolutionary compared to what we're told, because we've reached a point where we can't go any further. For a while, as we don't know who we are. We've just lost that of our purpose and finality. We're always missing on something intrinsic from God. But then we've gotten to the point we don't even know what we are, and the whole transgenderism. And it's like beyond that, you can't. That's it, because then you have the image of God is completely disfigured, and if you don't have that, how do you build anything? So, okay, very interesting in that. Going back to as we get near, if we have a little bit more time, but um, I want to go to an important question that keeps coming up, and it ties into something that we'll be working together on in the summertime, and that is marriages that have a sense of wanting to do mission but feel incapable of how to do that, and knowing where to start, because even St. John Paul II talked about the importance of families ministering to families, but in the broader economy of things, those who want to make a difference but realize it takes so much, it really takes a radical step of faith, and often abandoning a lot of things and securities, as we would call them, to do that. This seems to be right in your alley of the St. John Institute. I remember when it was first founded, I gave a talk on this, and a family, like I mean, I was excited and like petrified at the same time, because they could like, what you said during your talk was exactly what we needed to hear. We're leaving everything and we're going to Denver. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But deep inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, Peter, like I pray that like this, it's like now I'm being tested, and I think the family I'm talking about, because it was like the first one of the first ones. And because this goes back, yeah, this is like 2017, 18. So anyway, but is that kind of where things need to be now? Is you have to be willing to go to the biblical route of just put it all aside and follow me as a family? Because a lot of people, the world will say you're irresponsible. What are you doing? You have to do this. You have a responsibility to provide, and all of those things, and on an earthly sense, would ring true, and even on a Catholic sense, I mean, you have a responsibility to provide. But when they say, "Well, God will provide," it almost seems like an easy out. But it is. It really isn't. That's kind of heroic. So,
Oh, sure. I mean, what you're talking about there is important because, of course, you have a responsibility. Of course, you need to do the very best you can for your kids. Well, my challenge is simply, well, take the two options and stack them up, and ask which is going to be better for the kids. Because if you're going to say that, on the other hand, playing soccer, getting into video games at age 6, getting their first phone at age 9, sending inappropriate images with their classmates, and by age 12, and then maybe finding some sort of youth group that doesn't work and seeing them leave the church by age 16, if that's really going to be better for the kids, well then go for it. But like, I don't think people should discount dramatic, wonderful actions just without evaluating them. Because on the other hand, take a look at what this could mean. Well, we sold things, we bought a boat, and we went on a mission trip to the third world country where our family was united. Our kids had an international experience, learned a different language, learned to depend upon God. Were able to develop their skill sets in ways that they otherwise never could. I mean, a little bit of creativity here. What's so bad about taking mission trips every year for a month and building houses in a country that needs them, or even in your own country in a state that needs it? What's so bad about this? So I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just saying before you discount it simply because it's unnatural or not the norm. Let's put it that way. Uh, Compare it with the norm. Look what will happen if you don't do something great for Christ. What will happen in its place? And then say, well, like, which one are we going to choose?
For those who have this in their heart, where can they begin? What things should they be focusing on now? Versus, do you have that calling? I think a lot of people, they want to do something, but they're also afraid to change the way their life has been. And the only way to really find out is, especially in these times, is to set out into the deep, or start climbing the mountain. That's what we did, uh, right about that same time that you guys were, well, right before the St. John Institute was started. Was We just left everything in Aspen, got a trailer, and we started going around ministering to families, and it's eventually led us to where we are now. A lot of in between happened in there, but it's a story of God's providence, and to the fact that I'm able to do this with you right now is all part of that. So, what advice can you give for them, for couples who have this missionary spirit, um, and they just need that extra knowledge? Perhaps, like it says in the scripture, "My people perish for lack of knowledge," or vision. Some people.
What you get on the inside of daring is worth everything you risk on the outside. It's kind of like, yeah, you're imperiling certain things from the outside for a while, for a time. Yeah, and maybe it's not good for you to do, but when you look at it, you're like, we could do this, but it's just a risk, or it's just so out there. I would also encourage you to calculate the inner benefits of the freedom, the faith, the example you're giving to your kids about what it means to really live, and not to exclude that from your calculus, because the experience itself, uh, couldn't wouldn't it be amazing to live your married life, to live your family life the way you want to live it? Like, wouldn't it be neat just to have one shot to say, we got to dare something great for Christ and we did it. The rest of your life as a married couple, you're going to then be able to share that with the kids. And
Hmm.
that just has inestimable value. You're creating a spiritual legacy. And so, take your time and evaluate things and make good decisions. But remember that a good decision isn't always necessarily an easy one. There's nothing easy about daring, but there's nothing great about ease.
Hmm. I think that's it. It keeps coming back to the fact of, what do you really believe? Do you really believe that the Lord is going to provide? Do you really believe God is God? And the God who loves us and actually desires these things of those, and you can say kind of the few, because very few are willing to do it. But do you really think God's going to leave us hanging, especially if we're living a life that puts us in a state of grace? We're really trying. We're not perfect. Our lives can still be a mess in many ways, but we will not quit. Like, you think the Lord's just going to do? I wouldn't do that as a father for my own kids. There's nothing that makes me prouder than to see them begin to take things that I've instilled in them and begin to do them, versus me wanting to micromanage everything. I do in the beginning. I do micromanage everything, but it gets to a point where I want to see them begin to take their steps, and we have our little one who's just beginning that, and I kind of back up a little bit more each time. Here comes Cassian. He makes a couple of Frankenstein steps, and then he falls forward, and he's all happy along the way because he knows I'm there. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, we've experienced this in our own marriage. When we've done it, we've experienced the heart aches, the breaks, all of that. So I think what you're saying, Father, is right on, and it's something that I can say with great assurance, because this has nothing to do with me, is that God always always rewards acts of true faith and trust in Him. And I think that's the saints of today that you're talking about. Even within the description of the St. John Institute, your symbol, you can see beneath your picture, is this fire that starts from within. And God places that fire. Don't let the devil say, "Oh, I'm thinking about it," so God doesn't. He doesn't want that. That's an evil. You got to be careful about. This agere contra, which can be poisonous if you don't understand that. Oh, that's just my will. I really feel called to go out and and teach on these things because I would love to do it and I'm capable of doing it. But that's my will. I'd rather just sit in my cubicle or whatever. It's like I think that's if your spiritual director is saying like, listen to that, I think you should run. But anyway, we're at the end of our time together. I just want to thank you for this conversation. I see it as a starter. I want to give you the final word in just a minute. I want to put something on the screen because I know people who are watching this. Um, they'll share with me in comments later on of really what's on their heart, and more of a personal one-on-one kind of thing. Well, there's a way that you can begin to take a step to see what the Lord has for you and to have something that's going to stick with you for the rest of your marriage and for your family life. And that's something that we're going to be a part of working together, my wife and I, with Father Nathan, and also friends of ours, Bill and Angela Schneiders, with their ministry, Veritas Living. It's really a perfect combination of people coming from all different angles to give a full puzzle of a vision that God I think, is going to use to set that fire on your heart. I know from my own experience, these kinds of things, they really do that. It's very different than a virtual thing or a podcast or something you've done digitally. Being in person always moves us to decision. So on the screen here, you'll see um, we have a beautiful retreat that's coming up. Well, 6 months from now. So plenty of time to get ready, but now is the time to register. June 10 to the 14th, 2026, in the beautiful mountains in Montana. And that's why it's called Ascend, because that's the path that we're on. We kind of go from base camp to base camp, but it's a leadership retreat for mission driven couples. So that also means if you are simply mission driven, this is going to help you develop, give you the foundations for the leadership skills, things of our faith. Father's going to be. We're just so blessed to have Father as a part of this. He brings many more many more things than I can say right now to this retreat. But we're all going to be giving you can say, our pieces in a way that's going to, I think it's going to be very inspiring. So to jump on that, June 10th to the 14th, simply go to ascend-experience.com. Be on the screen there. You can see that and how you can and sign up for that. Father, final words to you. What do you see for 2026? Take it anywhere that you feel you need to go with that. Beyond this,
I
the
don't
NFL
know. I
football
never
player.
thought about that question in my life.
You know what? It's here. It's here
I'll
right
take it day
now.
by day. I'll take it day by day and try to make it a gift to God. That's how I see the greatness is in the simplicity, from my perspective. So let's take everything we can and make it a gift back to God.
All right. Well,
Thanks, Peter.
Father's a Pro Bowl. It's a chosen priest for next year, and well, I agree with that. We do have to see there's a lot that we don't know. So a lot of people they're in the prediction world, and 9 out of 10 times it's always very negative. I think those things for those who look at what's going on, you could see what's falling and crumbling and all that. But like we said at the beginning, this is the void where the saints always arise. If you think about it, the saints almost always, if not always, they arise from circumstances. The desert fathers, they went to the desert because Rome is falling. And you couldn't just become a martyr anymore just by saying, "Hey, I'm a Christian." Now it's like now you got to go out to the desert and become a saint that way. The monasticism, it's like circumstances are always
Well, then I see 2026, a year of saints.
Oh, okay. See, I
That's
was
there you
feeding it
go.
until you took it. All right.
I
I do
appreciate
believe
it,
this.
Dr.
I do
Howard.
believe I believe that as well. And the best saints are going to be those who come to the Ascend retreat. That's what I'm getting right now. Seriously,
For
Father,
sure.
thank you so much. Father's with the St. John Institute in Englewood, Colorado. Father, tell us how we can follow your mission there and where we can learn more.
Sure. Go to the website. It's SAINT John Institute.org, stjohninstitute.org. And then sign up for our newsletter or sign up to become a member, and you'll get texts and emails that will change your life.
That's awesome. And your best introduction is going to be to join us in June in a very intimate atmosphere with like-minded married couples that are going to be seeking just what you are and really getting the inside blessing of having Father alone in the beautiful mountains of Montana. I just can't think of anything better.
Not alone, but with the Howers. With
That's
the
right.
Howers.
That's right. That's right.
The Fulton Sheen Institute.
That's right. Of course, you can
Thank you,
follow us.
guys.
Yes, as well. Thank you, Father, for everything, and definitely looking forward to June. And I hope that's the Holy Spirit really puts a spotlight on your mission because it's really what we need. You are filling a very important void for what we need in 2026. So God bless you, all your work, and know that you'll be in our prayers.
God bless you. Thank you.
You are called to do great things, to build, to lead, to influence. How do you balance faith, family, and calling without losing your joy? No one prepares you for how hard it can be to hold both mission and marriage together. If your marriage is weak, your mission will eventually suffer. But what if you could strengthen both? What if your mission and marriage could thrive together? Welcome to Ascend, a high-level immersion experience for Catholic entrepreneurs and mission-driven couples. Fortify your marriage to magnify your impact. Embrace holiness and wholeness for sustainability. Scale your mission to new heights with new insights. At Ascend, you will build resiliency into your marriage. Retreat and rest and adventure together, and anchor yourselves to your unique family why. Gain the tools to sustain your mission without burnout. Take the time to dream and plan together again. Form lasting bonds with like-minded Catholic leaders. Be nourished in body, mind, and spirit. You will be challenged by expert coaches, theologians, and master leaders. And you will be inspired by saints and mystics who are relevant to your call. This is your moment to step into the marriage and mission God designed for you. Because as the family goes, so goes the world. It's time to attend Ascend and take your family to the height of your potential together.